Over the past few years, the military has tried to meet society where it was at by loosening their standards a little bit in order to help with recruitment, going, as they would say, woke, but, take whatever terminology you want. I witnessed this towards the end of my time in service. I left in 2021, and I'll tell you, 18, 19, 20, 21, a lot of things were changing. This included things like mental health accommodations, relaxed fitness standards, appearance waivers like beards and religious exemptions, and all of this in the name of acceptance or recruitment, right? And they called this the inclusive military, and they basically tried to meet Gen Z where they were at to make recruiting easier. The problem is that nobody really wanted to have the elephant in the room conversation, and that is that you can't just lower standards across the board when the end goal is war fighting. Like, we're not going to be fighting against people who are going to pick and choose, like,
oh, you know what, that person, they're probably having a bad day. That person believes that.
Doesn't matter. The standard is the standard because the standard does not exist. Not everybody deserves to join the military. You have to earn that right because the military wants the best and brightest to defend its borders. That's the way of the world, right? We hope that we never go to war, but that doesn't mean that we get to relax all of our standards because, as they say, in peace, prepare for war, right? You don't want to end up lackadaisical and then war comes a-knocking and you're not ready. It's always better to have full combat readiness, and then if something comes a knock and you're like, we got your number, buddy. That's the way it works. So the military noticed that it was getting harder and harder to meet recruitment mission, and then COVID happened. And so people are locked away, recruitment missions are struggling. Every branch other than the Marine Corps missed mission to my knowledge, at least on some level, and the Marine Corps even barely scraped by. Now, I will say, in my humble opinion, the Marine Corps refusing to reduce a lot of its standards probably played a large role in that, but every branch slipped on some level, including the Marine Corps, and that made recruitment harder. And then the response was, recruiting's harder, let's open the floodgates even more. Recruiting's even harder, let's open the floodgates a little more. And it created this kind of self-licking ice cream cone of not good. And so, luckily, just recently, we decided to kind of lay the hammer on that, and Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, decided that it was worth having a conversation with some generals. Because of COVID, everything went remote. Recruiting numbers tanked. It got hard to get into schools and talk to people, and it made the job very hard. Again, the answer seemed to be relaxed standards to open the doors rather than an alternative. Now, I'm not saying I know what the alternative was. I just know that relaxing standards to opening the doors, not necessarily the best way to move about things. As a result, leadership panicked. They loosened grooming standards, things like religious exemptions for beards and there were piercing rules changed and even gender rules. And I'm not saying what's right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just saying a lot of things were changed in order to make space for new joins, including tattoo policies and a lot of other things that were loosened up. Hell, the Army even launched prep courses where if you couldn't pass the ASVAB or were not in shape to go to recruit training, they sent you to a pre-boot camp where they basically just PT'd the crap out of you to help you lose weight and get in shape, and made you study all day until you could pass the ASVAB. And I'm telling you, if you were there and you were just getting drilled in ASVAB stuff all day, makes it easier to pass. Arguably not the worst thing in the world, but if they don't meet the standard, is the answer really to then use taxpayer dollars to basically force them to meet the standard so that you can take them into the military? Because let's be real, those are the people who didn't have the discipline to lose the weight or study. And you basically said, hey, you know what? You don't need it. We'll force you. And now the argument goes both ways here because, sure, I would imagine that some of those people made it through all this and they thank the Army for changing their life and now they're going to be just fine. But I would be curious 4 or 5 years down the road what the data shows for those people that we essentially forced and held their hand into being ready for the military, whether or not they ended up being a net positive or a net negative for the service. The jury's not out there. The data's not old enough. But the real problem was that they were helping the wrong people meet a looser standard as opposed to spending the effort to go find the right people. The messaging was wrong. The marketing was wrong. Everything was off. As a result, fitness standards dropped. Deployability rates dropped. I mean, a lot of different things took heat and just fell apart. In fact, I actually remember at one point towards the end of my time in 2021, I was getting a brief on extremism. And, we sit through this whole brief, and at the end, I had to sign a document saying I took the training. And what I noticed in the training was that there was not a single example of an extremism, an extremist type incident inflicted on a straight white male. It was all examples of straight white males, being extremists to other categories. And I'm not discrediting that there is this, but let's not pretend there's not a single example of the alternative. And so I actually got into some trouble because I basically said, I'm not going to sign this until you make this a neutral, balanced presentation that acknowledges that extremism can go both ways, not just one way. And so I didn't sign it. And then I got a lecture from this guy, and then his boss, and then his boss, and then his boss, and then his boss. And basically I got told, sign it or get out of the military. And that's not why I left the military. Let's be clear. I ultimately ended up signing it while saying, like, you guys all understand my frustration with this. And they actually agreed with me, but they had to get my signature. So I signed the stupid thing saying I got the training, because I did get the training. I just did not agree with the training contents. Not to say that I didn't agree with all of this being wrong, because it is. But I didn't agree with the fact that only this is wrong, and we're going to ignore that it happens the other way, because people suck no matter what your race, gender, age, height, weight, whatever is. There are people in every category of life that suck. So let's not pretend that it's only one category that sucks. So that was my whole point. Everybody sucks. Every category has somebody who sucks. So let's just acknowledge it across the board. And then I would have been much happier to sign that. But that was the type of stuff that we were dealing with. That was in 2021 as I was leaving the military. And no, this isn't Google. It's the United States military. This isn't Amazon. This isn't Apple. It's the United States military. We don't serve the mission of everybody gets our benefits if they want to join. We serve the mission of, you might go to war to defend the country. Are you ready? We don't care about your politics or identities or race or anything. We care about the standard and whether or not you can meet it. So by the end of 2024, people were super fed up all across the board. The Pentagon finally had enough and said, you know what? Recruiting numbers are still down. We got to fix this. And essentially they pulled it all back. They clawed it all back. You guys have seen the headlines about Pete Hegseth and the Department of War and the conversation with every general in the entire military brought in for that. Beards, you got 12 months to get rid of it or you're out. Fake lashes, gone across the board. Waivers are tightening up fast. Enlistment standards and re-enlistment standards are getting stricter. Fitness standards are getting tougher across every branch, right? They are making it to where everybody is actually able to go fight a war, which is arguably good. And this isn't just policy change. This is a cultural reset. We are going back to the mentality of training to fight and kill and fight our nation's wars, which is the whole point, let's be real, of the military. The benefits are incredible. They're great. They're wonderful. But the military has, I don't say one job, but one main job. And it is not provide benefits to anyone who wants to serve. It is to protect our nation. And the message is simple here. The cultural reset. You don't get to express yourself in a combat zone. You get to fight the war. And that's fine with me. And I get it. Some people did need a shot. Some waivers did help the people who didn't necessarily have a chance and wanted to serve get in and serve, and now they're living their best life. And that's awesome. But now we have a different problem, and that is the people who never should have served, right? And this is where that data, I'm going to be very curious to see the people who were like handheld through ASVAB and fitness, people who didn't qualify to serve, that we essentially made qualified to serve, are struggling to stay in. They're costing tax dollars. They're going to get benefits. They're going to be, that is what it is. And so the question I have is whether or not we'll see if it was worth it. Did those people go through and end up being very prominent members, very beneficial members to the military? Or are they people that we now will have to essentially carry the load for going forward? And only time will tell on that. So look, I joined in 2008 and I saw a lot of things change, better, worse. Like I was in when Don't Ask, Don't Tell got repealed, and I would tell you right now, nothing changed. I mean, maybe some things changed, but like at the end of the day, the military was no worse off for that. Now I will say, lowering and playing with PT standards does not benefit anyone. Making the fitness standard easier does not make the military better. I think you could argue one way or the other that whether you want to let, people's sexuality matter, I don't think it freaking matters, right? As long as it doesn't affect combat readiness. But I don't think we're talking about sexuality in the combat sense here. We're talking about fitness standards. That's a very different beast. If you can't meet the fitness standard, that's a whole different conversation than whether or not you like men or women, or both. And at the end of the day, whether you like it or don't, the inclusive standard is over. The elite military is coming back. That's the goal. They've been very clear with it within the Department of War. And I personally am for maintaining a standard. It's not to say anything negative about your belief set. It's just to say that the standard should exist regardless of the belief set. And no, a religious exemption beard does not make you a better or worse soldier. It just makes you stand out. And as such, the military is not about allowing people to stand out. They're about a standard. And as there's no beneficial argument to whether or not you have a beard, the standard is a standard. It's not about religion, it's about appearance, standards, regulations, order, discipline, normal military stuff. So look, if you're not physically ready, mentally locked in, or emotionally prepared, you might be wasting your time joining the military. It's not going to be a walk in the park and they're not going to cater to you. And you're either going to get cut or wish you had. However, if you're ready, willing, and able to train, to earn it, and to build discipline instead of just excuses, this is your time to serve. Because the military is again focused on being a filter for the best, not just a funnel to make people feel good. So what's your take? Should the military continue to tighten up standards? Should PT improve? Should PT tests and fitness tests get harder again? Or do you think the inclusive model was worth trying? Is there a real benefit to exclusive outside of the emotional feel-good side? Was there a tangible benefit to it? That's what I'm curious about. So yeah, drop comments. I'd ask that you keep it respectful. I'd love to hear your thoughts, pros, cons on inclusive versus standard, and where we're going with the military. But again, I ask that you keep it respectful, professional. We can have this dialogue in a meaningful way. Because again, warriors debate and civilians complain. It is what it is. And look, if you want to see how this is going to affect MEPS, building wealth, VA benefits, and any of that stuff, make sure you subscribe and follow along for all of our videos because that's what we do. We teach service members and veterans how to maximize their benefits in order to achieve wealth and create the life of their dreams. No fluff, no theory, no BS, just real tools for real warriors. And I'm glad you're here. Have a great day.